Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. A little more about myself is that I am at the Oregon Judicial Department. We are a unified court system, and I had the honor and pleasure to be able to bring the training that John developed, the Signature Counter Experience, which we renamed to the Signature Customer Experience in Oregon, and we've been able to provide it with an Oregon team in our courts. And
excellent.
Yeah.
So I'm John Lang. Just an overview. The Signature Counter Experience was developed because there was an absence of thought, I would say, in Massachusetts, not only how we treat the people who come through our doors every day, but how we treat each other. And so this, although it's called the counter experience, and as Valerie has said, the customer experience, we're really focused, this training is really focused on every interaction and experience that we would have in the court. We developed this training to very intentionally include judges, clerk's offices, probation departments, and security, because everyone works together as a team for the administration of justice. No one person can deliver justice on their own. No one entity can deliver justice on their own. So the way that we structured this training is to bring every court team together and allow them to train together, experience together, to learn about each other through the process. You'll get to experience some of that today. And I think they put us after lunch because we're going to make you get up and move around a little bit. So you're not falling asleep through the process, but I hope you enjoy our time together.
Yeah. So here are some goals that that the training provides, the two-part training, and this is overall the goals that we share with our judges and our staff to understand. I'm going to try to, I apologize for that, and I will try to stay away from John. But some goals that I wanted to highlight is, we want people to engage and empathize with other people that are coming to our courts, identify stress triggers and develop strategies for how to manage stress within ourselves, but also for our court users who are coming and we know that they're experiencing trauma in the various cases that they have before us. It's also understanding the effects of our choice of words and our tone and our body language when we're welcoming people into our courts. And also understanding the power of teamwork, which is more for part 2. You won't get to experience that, but part 2, we do talk about teamwork and what it means to be a leader and, the various ways in which we have to be teams in courts. And the other part of our goal that is not up here, but what we're trying to do is to provide you sort of a little glimpse into Signature Counter Experience for you to see how it goes we're going to do some exercises and also go over some concepts that we have. And then we're going to also provide some time for you to figure out how do you facilitate this type of training? How do you bring it to your jurisdiction? And try to answer the questions that you may have of the benefits of having this type of training with you.
All right, so to get started, my goal is to get everyone in here open, honest, authentic, and engaged. We try to create safe environments while doing training. We're in a professional environment, so people know the boundaries that they have. But we do want people to be able to engage openly and authentically when we're doing training, because we're not, as trainers, as facilitators, we're not there just to teach something. We're there to understand the population of people that we're engaging with, and so we want to create that environment. In the interest of creating that environment, I'd like everybody to please raise their right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that what happens in my Vegas stays in my Vegas. You are duly sworn. Thank you. You're going to engage in exercises where I want you to be open and authentic. I also, through this process, tell personal stories. And although I tell personal stories with thousands of people, those are my personal stories. They're not your stories to take out of here and engage other people with. So I want to create an environment where people can be themselves, tell their truth, but also that we get to learn through the process. And that's what we hope to give you a little glimpse of today. So in the interest of getting you engaged and moving around, I want this group up to this column. You are group 1. Behind the column, this is group 2. Let's say up to this chair here, you are group 3, and from this chair back on, you are group 4. Group 1, please don't go anywhere just yet. Let me finish the instructions and then you can move. Group 1, you're going to go to that newsprint right there. Group 2, you're going to go to the newsprint behind that column. Group 3, you're going to go to the newsprint to the left of the door. Group 4, you're going to go to the newsprint in the back. I'm going to need one person to be a scribe for each group. There are markers at each of those things. So, there are markers at each of those locations. Scribes, you are not the censor of the group. We are doing a brainstorming exercise, not a consensus building exercise. So if there's an attribute that is identified while you're going through this exercise, it goes up there without discussion. Scribes, please, if you were meant to be a doctor in your life, do not volunteer to be the scribe. Someone with good penmanship, because I have to read these afterwards. So, we're going to do a qualities and characteristics exercise. Group 1, you're going to go to this newsprint and write judges are ... Group 2, you're going to write lawyers are ... Group 3, you're going to write self-represented parties are ... Group 4, you are going to write co-workers are ... Hopefully your co-workers are not in the same group with you through this process. You're going to have 5 minutes to walk through this exercise. I'm looking for about 20 responses from each group. All responses are good responses. So if everyone could collectively get up, go to their respective boards. Scribes, please make sure you write down everything that you hear. I will give you a time check as we do this. For those of you online, while they're moving, think about those qualities and characteristics of those respective groups, and please think about how you might identify them as well. You can also put it in the chat. Group 3 is to the back left of the door. So this is not a competition, but right now lawyers are doing the best.
I don't think the judges are hearing you, though.
Yeah. So you're not. Yeah. Everything that's said goes up on the list. You can say more than one. We're looking for as many as you can come up with. Yeah, keep them going. This is rapid fire. We don't have a lot of time. You have 3 minutes left. Oh, co-workers are winning now. Not that this is a competition.
Lawyers, you don't need to compete that much. Need to give deference to judges. Just put it all there.
Reliable.
Self-sufficient.
Good job.
2 minutes left. 2 minutes left. All right, excellent, excellent.
That would have been a good one.
Wonderful, wonderful. Once you get to 20, you can go back to your seats. If you got to 20, you can go back to your seats. No, they can all go together if they fit.
Yeah, right.
All right, time. Time, you can go back to your seats. Close enough. Hopefully everyone's awake now. Some of you were having a little bit too much fun. All right. So excellent. So from an individual perspective, one person has a quality, a characteristic about this category of people, and it gets on the list. Maybe in the process, someone says something and there's agreement in the group. It might even be that there is agreement and consensus among all of us here today. Let's go through the list that you created. Judges are particularly deaf. Oh, I don't know. They're partially and particularly. They are brilliant. They are good listeners. They are honorable. They're not great administrators. They're analytical. They're advocates. They're fair. They're impartial. They difficultly speaking English. They speak legalese. Okay. It says difficulty speaking English.
Plain English. Plain.
Okay. Legal-minded, dependent on staff. Judges are unbiased. They're funny, reliable, self-sufficient, entitled, busy. They're involved in community. They're parents, they're human, they're tech phobes. Good list? Excellent. Lawyers, please raise your hand. Lawyers are demanding. They're procrastinators. They're assholes. They're anal.
Tricks there.
No, I should have not said the word out. There was a parental advisory on the first screen. They're pedantic. They are, did I say anal already?
No, but you could say it
All
again
right.
if you did.
They're assholes and anal. They're smart. They're late. Emergency! Exclamation point. They lack communication. They're competitive. They're entitled. They care. And they put a heart around it. That's the same person that said asshole. They're passionate, they're client-focused, they're classy, manipulative. They're talkative, they're overcompetent, they're analytical, they're arrogant. They are overconfident, they're type A, but they're dedicated.
John, you're having such a tone when you say all this stuff about lawyers. I don't know. I'm
just
feeling some
repeating
sort of way.
what is up here. Is that a good list? Excellent. Self-represented litigants are, they're frustrating, confused, they're sovereign citizens, they're all alone, they're emotional, they're screwed, misguided, fearful, more knowledgeable than court staff. And they're uninformed. So they're more knowledgeable than court staff and they're uninformed. They're at a disadvantage. They're entitled to justice. No trust of the court. In need of patience and understanding. They're very committed. They're capable if given a little help. Clueless of the law. Combative, argumentative, committed to being heard. They are determined. Good list? Excellent. Co-workers are. They're helpful. They're difficult, whiny, fun, lazy. They're different. They're hardworking. They're sensitive. They're annoying. They're high maintenance. There's drama. They're teammates, friends. They're gossipers. They're a resource. They're necessary, knowledgeable, creative, needy, and important. Good list? Excellent. What do those lists say about those people? What does it tell us about them? Anyone? They're multifaceted, absolutely. They're complicated. What else?
They have different categories and titles, but they're all the same.
Different categories and titles, but all the same. Excuse me?
That was an insight.
Yes. They're people. Anything else? Lawyers are assholes? Lawyers, raise your hand again. Okay. Yeah. What else does it say about them?
I thought it was hard because everyone's different. So, like this attorney here said, are equals.
Yeah.
But I've also worked with ones that I know that really care and they're not like that. So it's hard to just say what they are if they're not one thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What else does it say about them?
They're all passionate in their role.
They're all passionate in their roles. Anything else that it says about them? Excellent. Now that we know what it says about them, what does it say about us? It's your experience. Absolutely. Absolutely. In your daily interactions, you experience people, these categories of people in these ways. What else does it say about it? You see it through your colored lenses. What else does it say about us? It says our bias. We're all flawed. And quite frankly, if I put, make them, attendees as one of the categories, you would find something wrong with them as well. So I know I have it somewhere. I always lose it. So these are our biases. There are preconceived notions. There are judgments about the people that we work with every single day. And people hear the word bias and they automatically have a visceral reaction. No one wants to be biased. We're in our judiciary. We're in a judicial system. We should be impartial and fair. So to identify a bias is difficult for us. To say that we actually have it is difficult, particularly for judges. But we all have biases. The idea here is not to think about bias as a negative and to have it fester within us. The whole idea of this is to be reflective and think about, what did you contribute to in these lists? And where were you in agreement with others on the list? Not to be judgmental of yourself, but to understand what you show up to work with every single day. If I were to walk into a room and someone asked me, John, what would you say for judges, lawyers, self-represented litigants, and coworkers? I would have attributions as well, but I'm totally aware of it. It's not an exercise of judgment, it's an exercise of reflection. And what it means for you is, when I come in contact with a self-represented litigant that I say is frustrated, confused, alone, emotional, screwed, misguided, fearful, uninformed, at a disadvantage, they have no trust of the court. And then I think about a judge who is honorable, analytical, fair, impartial, legal-minded, unbiased, reliable. When I contrast the two of those, what voice do I hear? Can I hear the self-represented litigant's voice? Or do I exclude it because I have a preference for a judge or for an attorney? It's important how we understand how we're interacting with different categories of people every day, because we are all fair people. We all show up to work every day trying to administer justice. But if justice is compromised because of our biases, we need to be aware of it in such a way that we can counteract it.
So here we have a slide, and we're kind of going to delve into a little more about understanding about bias and where the different levels it shows up in our mind. So we have subconscious bias. It's kind of more of a gut feeling, gut check. You don't really know what's causing it, but you can pretty much, it's like it just doesn't feel right at that moment, right? And it's easier to recall once you start thinking about, why did I react this way? You can then find the reasoning behind it. Now you have unconscious bias, and unconscious bias is more considered to be our brain, in the brain realm. It's the automatic responses that our brain does to shorten the cognitive load. And there are a lot of cognitive biases. I think one of the ones that I like to mention, especially for our courts, is anchoring bias. It is relying too heavily on one piece of information, usually the first piece of information that you're given. And so I think it shows up in sentencing or in jury awards. When the prosecutor tells the judge, you should give this person the maximum sentence of this, then that is what the judge might anchor their decision on. Or if in a jury you have the plaintiff says that this is how much damages was, then the jury is going to anchor their decision based on that. Now, we also go into implicit bias, and I know that the terms have been used interchangeably, and there's a slight nuance with it. Implicit bias includes unconscious bias, so all the things that come into the cognitive biases, but it also includes a little more than that. It's pretty much the judgments, the perceptions, and the assumptions that you make about certain people or groups. In that sense, implicit biases are more pervasive and they're harmful. And although they are pervasive and harmful, they are kind of the ingrained neural pathways that are there. So they can't really be overwritten or erased, but they can be addressed. What we have to do, as John said, is we have to be aware of it, recognize it, and then we can really address it so that we don't act based on those implicit biases. And John, I think you're going to share a little more.
So I'm not here to say that you have bias. I'm here to say that we all have bias. And one of the things that I struggled with is people walking in the streets with their pants below their butts and belts holding it on in place. I look at that person and immediate response would have been uneducated, user and abuser of drugs and alcohol. They come from a broken home, maybe criminally involved. Parents have no structure in that home whatsoever. That would just be my thought. This is the way that I present myself as much as possible. I value presentation. And because I value presentation, I wear a belt at my waist. And some of you may have seen me already go inside my pants, tuck in my shirt, pull up my pants, because I want to make sure my pants are on my waist always. The last thing I wanted to do while I was working for the court is be in my office, bend down to pick up something, and the Chief Justice say, "John, do you really think pink was the most appropriate choice of underwear today?" So I pull my pants up always, constantly, because I'm conscious. I want to present myself in a particular way. Now, I have a 38-year-old son. I have a 36-year-old son. I have a 31-year-old son, a 28-year-old son, and a 23-year-old daughter. And I know what you're thinking right now. John, you are way too young to have these children. When my now 31-year-old son was going off to college, he came to me and he said, "Dad, I'm going off to college. I'm going to be living on my own. I'm going to figure out what I'm passionate about. I'm going to figure out what it is that I want to do with my life. I'm going to figure out who I am as a person." And of course, I say, "Son, that's what your journey is. Why are we having this conversation?" And he said, "Dad, I'm going to do things differently than you did them. I may not make all the choices you made, but it's going to help me find out who the person is that I am." And when my son was going off to college, and he got to the bottom of our stairs on his journey to go off to college, my son pulled his pants below his butt. And it tested every assumption that I've ever had about those people. My son is brilliant. He's one of the smartest people that I know. He's not a user and abuser of drugs and alcohol. He doesn't come from a broken home. And I would suggest to you that my son has the best parents in the world. Valerie says that's a bias, but no, those are facts. So if it's not true for my son, then it doesn't have to be true for other people. So I no longer look at people who present that way and make those judgments. I'm aware of the judgments that I used to make. And as conscious as I am, there's a place that I struggle no matter what I do, no matter what reflection, no matter what processing that I do, I still struggle. How many of you drive? Raise your hands. So where I struggle is with all of you. Driving is the thing that I least like to do. And because it's the thing that I least like to do, I categorize people in 3 ways. The first way, when I'm visiting Oregon, Valerie and I are on the highway. Valerie, in a 65-mile-an-hour zone, is doing 85 miles an hour. You were sworn into Vegas, you're clapping. You're sworn into Vegas, you can't repeat that anywhere else. Live audience, you were sworn in as well. 85 miles an hour in a 65-mile-an-hour zone, and I am ducked in my seat, scared to death. Valerie is a maniac when it comes to driving. How many maniacs do we have in the room? Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15,
Now,
16,
you should raise your
17.
hand now.
All right, 17. All right, wonderful. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. You heard a little bit about my biography. For the last 10 years, I was at the Massachusetts Trial Court. Before that, I was with the Department of Children, Families, and the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. One of the things that I used to do is when people came into service with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and their needs could not be met, they would go to a commissioner, a secretary, a governor, and I would get a phone call. "John, on behalf of the Commonwealth, do you think you could work out some arrangement to support this family?" One of my skill sets is that I read people. I try to understand their needs. I pay attention to them. I hear all that it is that they have to say. I see how they sit in the chair. I see when they're happy and uncomfortable. And because I can do that, I can relate to somebody. I can let them vent for a few minutes. I can engage with them productively afterwards. When I ask that question, who in here is a maniac? I'm not asking because I need to know. I could point each one of you out. And each of you have seen me intentionally look you in your eyes, regardless of where you're sitting in this room. So I'm going to ask the question again. How many maniacs do we have in the room? Please raise your hand. Valerie, I think we might have doubled the number of maniacs in the room. So if you're not a maniac, you got to fit into one of these other two categories of people. So Valerie is flying down the road. She's a maniac. And we're driving in the fast lane. I'll give her credit for that. She was in the left-hand lane. But we come across a person talking on their telephone, doing 40 miles an hour, and we're stuck behind this person now. No, that person is a moron. How many morons do we have in this group? Please raise your hand. No. No self-identified morons? All right. This is about self-reflection, not projection. All right. So if you're not a maniac and you're not a moron, then you must fit into this last category of people. It's the person driving appropriately down the road. They're coming to an intersection. The light is green. They start to slow down. The light is green. They get closer to the intersection. They almost come to a stop. The light turns yellow. They fly through the light, and you get stuck in that red light. Yeah. It's the person who's driving with their left blinker on for 4 miles. They never make a left-hand turn. It's the person who pulls up at a stop sign and waits for it to turn green. That person is an idiot. So half the room are maniacs. There were 0 morons. Idiots, please raise your hand. So I'm a sociologist, not a mathematician, but this is not adding up correctly. Driving is the thing that I least like to do, and because it's the thing that I least like to do, I categorize people in 3 ways, none of which are positive. But every day I know that there are people on the road doing the right thing. They're driving the right speed limit or just a little bit faster. They put their left signal on and actually make a left-hand turn. I don't pay attention to those people. Every day you come across judges, lawyers, self-represented litigants, and coworkers that do the right thing. They thank you for the service that you provide to them. They go to your bosses and they tell you how much they appreciate you because in many systems that they've interacted with, they've never felt the dignity and respect that they felt with you. And yet and still, those aren't necessarily the people that you thought of when I asked you to describe those categories of people. May it be that your interactions are influenced how we think about people every day. And although the people that you deal with that are difficult are probably a very small percentage of the people that you're interacting with, generally, those are the ones that are caught in your mind about who people are. And if that's the case, we need to be self-reflective in understanding where those biases are coming from and do whatever we can to mitigate them.
So one thing that we love in this training are icebergs, or at least I like commenting, I love icebergs. And one, you make big mistakes happen when you judge a person by what you can see or hear. And you see this iceberg. Why do you think it's relevant? Why do you think this iceberg is relevant? And there's a lot more below the surface.
I think for a lot of people, perception is reality, and what we perceive is only this much of it, but in actuality, there's so much more.
Yeah. So for some people, perception is reality, and although we're only perceiving the top half of it, sorry, I'm paraphrasing if that's okay, there's a lot more, but we're just not seeing it. Yeah, thank you. And so this is all the things that we're not seeing about people when they're walking to us. So when somebody comes into our courthouses, we might be able to see their physical characteristics, whether they have a disability or not, because they might be using a wheelchair or a cane. But there's a lot of things that we don't even see. And if we don't get to talk to the person, we won't even know whether they speak English or if they have an accent. But all the other things that below the surface that also may be impacting the person, that they're also bringing into the courthouse, are below the surface. They're whether they have a hidden disability, whether they have military experience, what their values are, their age, their marital status or sexual orientation. These are all the things that we're not seeing unless we really want to engage with that person in a conversation or a dialogue to get to understanding and meeting that person where they're at so that we can provide excellent customer service to them. And I would like to go back to disability because we know that more than 1/4 of our population has a disability, whether it is visible or hidden. What are the things that we are doing in our courthouses to make sure it's accessible, to make sure that this person doesn't feel further stigmatized or that they're not being given the dignity that they need to get through the process? Definitely, we know that if somebody's using a wheelchair, there are things that we can make sure to remove barriers for them. But are we doing the same things to examining and analyzing our courthouses to make sure that we're removing the barriers for those who have hidden disabilities? So if somebody comes to your counter and says, I don't understand this notice, are you just going to tell them, well, you have to read it? How about if they have dyslexia? How about if they have some other hidden, or the trauma that they're experiencing, making it very hard for them to comprehend the legalese that our judges love to use? How are we making sure that we're actually meeting the person where they're at and going beyond the surface to helping them understand our court processes?
So tell me what you see in this picture here. So we hear rabbit, we hear duck and rabbit. Some people look at the picture, they see a duck, they don't see the rabbit. Some people see the rabbit, they don't see the duck. Here's the thing. You can't see both of them at the same time. You can see one or the other. So when you make that judgment, you stop looking. You're not paying attention anymore. But someone said duck. That's what they saw. Someone says rabbit. You have another perspective, and you look and you find the rabbit. Perspective taking is important. There are some things even about ourselves that don't allow us to see everything that's in front of us. So the more perspectives that we have, feeding input into the way that we do things, the better we can do what it is that we do. Now, does everybody see the duck and the rabbit? Does anybody not see it? Excellent. So all of you see the duck and rabbit. Does anybody else see any other species of animal in this picture? Actually, let me be more specific. Does anybody in here see a monkey in this picture? I'll give you 10 seconds to find the monkey. Raise your hand if you see the monkey. Great. One of our trial court employees saw a monkey in the picture, and I had to spend an hour with him after the training. Glad you don't see it.
You're making them worry that they had to raise their hand. All right. So this is the diversity wheel. That's another thing that we have and that we, talk about the dimensions of diversity, right? And just like the iceberg, the diversity wheel also has the various dimension or factors that go into making you the unique person that you are, whether it is based on personality, were my introverts in the room? If you believe it, I'm also an introvert. Or the religion or gender identity or race. And these factors are the things that also give us, that makes us different, or that also make us have affinity towards each other. So things that we find in common and that we can have that common ground. And we have to really think about, what our differences. And when we're thinking about what those differences are, it's really about what assumptions and judgments we're making to those differences from us, right? To be aware about those assumptions and judgments, whether they're negative. So I want you to take about 5 seconds to think about where you are on the diversity wheel and certain kind of dimensions and how you would describe yourself. This is just for you to reflect. It's not a sharing exercise. I won't make you raise your hand in any way, but just thinking about some of the dimensions and where you see yourself on this diversity wheel. Have you all engaged? I think 5 seconds passed once I just silence. Have you all engaged in the diversity wheel or seen it before or used it as a way to reflect? So whenever I think about the diversity wheel and the different things, going back to the iceberg, but here is, most of you don't know that English is my third language. My first language was French and Haitian Creole. And so I'm an immigrant. And although John says he is the best parent, I would like to take that title because my 6-year-old says I'm the best mom ever. But those are all the different things that really give us affinity, right? And the commonhood, and then also just the differences. And so we have to really think about and reflect how we're looking at affinity and how we're approaching people, and then how we're thinking about the differences that people have from us. And we also, with the diversity wheel, I like how it goes even above, like more globally. And we're talking about era, generations. There have been a lot of conversations about generations in the workplace. I get to say I'm a proud millennial, and remind that the boomers were, our parents. And so whatever happens with millennials, it is what it is. No, not. No? They say we're the trophy generation, but who gave us the trophies? But I digress. But we also have to think about how we're being socialized. There's research out there that shows that as young as 9 years old, people already, or children, can identify certain traits based on accents. So they did a study with 9-year-olds, and they had them listen to a northern accent, and they had them listen to a southern accent. Who do you think they said was kinder? And who do you think they said was smarter? You. Yeah. Without even reading this study, you all already knew this. So these are different ways that we are being socialized into having this understanding and, that are kind of helping shape our perceptions and assumptions about different groups. And so we kind of cap off our discussion about biases. Biases are normal. To have a brain, to be human, is to have a bias. But as public servants, we must ensure that our opinions and biases are not interfering with our ability to provide a high-quality service experience, regardless of the real or perceived differences that may exist between ourselves and those we serve. Our professional interactions require us to acknowledge that, as the iceberg reminds us, no two people can be the same, even identical twins, and nor should we treat them as such. Do you all have an identical twin in your family or friends that you know? Are they the same in person? They might have wildly different kind of characters. Yeah. And so we shouldn't expect our court users to behave the way that we would behave or to have the same level of understanding or decorum if we don't even expect siblings, identical twins, to be the same. And I like to also share that, we are public servants. Our court users look at us, whether we are not judges, whether we're not lawyers, they look at us as the person that has the most knowledge to be able to get them through this process. And so in a sense, they look at us as the gatekeepers. And if we don't check our ingrained biases, to be able to help them, then it really can impact access to justice. And I think of it as when I came to this country with my mom, we only spoke French and Haitian Creole. And then she had my younger brother who was born here. And at the house, we only spoke French. And when he finally was old enough to go into kindergarten, and the teacher assessed him, she went to my mother and said, "It is a shame that he was born in this country and he doesn't speak English well." My mom felt so ashamed as a parent that when she came back home, she stopped speaking French in the house. She said, "We can only speak English from now on because your brother has to get out of ESL." So we stopped speaking English in the house to help him get out of ESL, which he did within a couple of months. We still stopped for 2 years or so. She just only wanted to speak English to him. My younger brother at this point can say, "J'aime le fromage, j'aime le pain," and he understands, but he refuses to speak French. This is a reminder that it takes one generation to lose a language. It takes 2 generations to gain it back. What are we doing for our court users, especially those who are acquiring English, to make them feel like they belong and that they have a way of understanding the court process?
Thank you, Valerie. So there are other concepts that are explored in part 1 of the training. We talk about stress. And we're not just talking about the stress of the court users that come into our court, but we also talk about the stress of individual courts. So just a few anecdotes. Let's say, how does stress manifest itself in any of you? What would be a symptom? How would I know that you were stressed? Yes, please. You break out in hives. Absolutely. How else might you? You don't process everything that you hear when you're stressed. You're agitated when you're stressed. Physical pain when you're stressed. Absolutely. Quiet and withdrawn. Fidgety. Now, this is all of you. This is how stress manifests itself in you. Have you ever seen a court user quiet and withdrawn? Agitated? And when you see that, do you say, "Oh, they must be stressed"? Or do you say something else? Non-compliant, asshole, however you want to describe it. You may not say it openly, but you're thinking it. What's wrong with them? Absolutely. But you stress very similar to them, but you don't see yourself in them when they present themselves in court. And I don't know about your experiences in terms of stressful situations. Hospitals and courts got to be at the top of them. People are coming to our courts stressed. And it's our job to understand that in such a way that we can interact with them productively.
Another concept that we go over is control versus influence. And we talk about, how much control do people have about the process? We think about how much control do we have in our lives and what do we have control over? Little control, some control, total control. And when we think about our court users, we ask how much do they feel like they have control over the process? Do they feel they have little to no control, some, or total control? Typically, we can all agree that our court users probably feel like they have little to some control because they're coming to our courts to make decisions that are being removed from them, whether it's their liberty, their child custody issues, or domestic violence. And so one way that we provide as kind of a toolbox is understanding how the differences between control versus influence, trying to empower that individual again. And even with our coworkers, trying to remind us to empower and feel grace and empathy towards them. And so we talk about what is control, the power of influence or direct people's behavior or the course of events. And what is the influence? It's the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself. And we say that we want to be more at the influence. We want to be able to influence people. And one way to do that is through our language and even the tone. So instead of using power over language, in which we provide the example of, here are the forms, I won't talk to you until you fill it out. Can we use power with language, more influencing language? of explaining to the person. In order for the judge to be able to see you and understand your case, you will need to fill out this form to give them that information to prepare. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. This is a way in which we can influence people by giving them the information that they need to understand why we're asking them the information, and then letting them know that we're still here to provide them assistance.
And there's expectations of service. There are expectations that we have when we're being serviced. There are expectations of service from court users to us. It's what do you want, how do you want it, and how do you want to feel when you get it? And I have this image and quote from Maya Angelou that's posted right behind my monitors so that I could see it all the time, and I share it during this training. But Maya Angelou says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Good customer service isn't about having someone come into the court and say, I need to see the judge. You grab them by the hand and walk them to the judge and say, Your Honor, they want to talk to you and plead their case. Good customer service is about exactly what Valerie said. Here's what you're here for. Here's what I need you to do in order to do it. I'll be here to support you through the process and provide any information to you. You're going to have to follow this process. Once you fill out the forms, we'll provide it and the judge will hear the case. May not be resolved today. You may have to come back another time, whatever it may be. But they don't know the process. And it's going to further frustrate them and you when you don't explain the process and you have that information, but don't share it with them.
So we shared some of the concepts and exercises for part 1, and this is the agenda when we go over it during the training. Now, we didn't share anything from part 2 because we didn't have time, but this is the agenda, and we have a lot more exercises. And how I like to set it up for our courts is after part 1, I tell them for part 2, we're going to have a quick reflection. I hope you're putting things into practice, and then I'm going to ask you to report back. That's your only homework. And then we're going to be a lot more interactive, and we're also going to ask for more engagement and volunteering. I would have loved to have put you all through that to be able to see how great role playing you are at, but we won't be doing that. But yes, there's a puzzle exercise, understanding, seeking help. We have a lot more videos for people to see different kinds of customer service. And then we talk about the difference between empathy and sympathy, especially in our courts, that we want to be more empathetic. That's where we want to be, where it's still impartial and neutral, but we're meeting people where they're at. And then we do some exercises as well as team building activities.
And I just want to say, I'm not sure that it's explicit in the description. This is a 7-hour training that was mandatory in Massachusetts. It's mandatory in Oregon.
We do not use word mandatory. Okay. It is a core training.
Yes.
Semantics.
Yeah. Semantics are important. And the way that we delivered it in Massachusetts was we would go to a court. We wouldn't go to some training facility. We would actually go to the court where people work. And we would provide the training, part 1, 8:30 to 12 o'clock, and another session from 1:30 to 1 o'clock to 4:30, so that everyone in the court hears the same information on the same day. We would go back 30 days later and do part 2. And because we want people to have time to reflect on what they learned before we do the practicals and the role playing and things like that. Most people say that part 2 is better than part 1. You only got a glimpse of what part 1 looks like, and most people say part 2 is better than part 1.
Picture of part 2 of the puzzle exercise that we do for people to get a better understanding of how our court users are experiencing our courts. And the picture, this is all Multnomah County, which is our largest court, and they got to be the pilot court for us when we were bringing signature counter experience over. So this here is a feedback page for us as we do this. I work for the executive office of the court, and what we would do is we would chart down a lot of the feedback that we got during the training.
We do this exercise, strengths, challenges, and solutions, because we want to understand the culture of each individual courthouse. Your system is one system and it has its culture, but each courthouse has its own culture. And so we want to understand that, and we want to understand the ways in which you can improve how you deliver service to each other and the public through the process. We want to know what the elements are of successful teamworks, because if we believe that if there's an element that we believe creates better teamwork, then we all need to buy in to those elements of successful teams. We ask them for suggestions moving forward. So now that you've gotten this training, what else could benefit you? Maybe you need some more training on substance use disorder. Maybe you need training on mental health. Maybe you need better communication inside your courthouse, because information filters to some people but doesn't get to everybody that needs to know. Let's figure out what those things are. That information is court specific, and nobody other than the court gets that information so that they can improve upon the things that were identified during the training.
I could add, in Oregon, it is very court specific, and we provide the report back to the trial court administrator for the court and the presiding judge. But then staff use it and judges use it as a way to also tell us about ourselves with the state court administrator's office. And we would have wished you would have rolled that out a little differently. And so we do report back the things that we hear about OSCA, how we refer to our office of state court administrator, and how our various divisions supporting our courts can do better at our customer service as well.
So facilitation matters. So this isn't about someone mastering information and sharing information. It needs to be facilitated in a way that allows for people to share their authentic experience, and we all learn from that. So it's not about information and content. It's about how you deliver that content in a way that brings people into the discussion. You need storytellers, because sometimes people don't understand from the practical experiences that they have in the court. They've made judgments about those people. Valerie talked about anchoring. You may anchor yourself there. So being able to tell a personal story may allow somebody in to see and understand something in a different way than if you were to just tell a story about something happening in the court. So we build that into the training as well. And in terms of facilitation, I will tell you, at one point, I started in 2014. It wasn't until 2018 that I had a staff. Doing this training the way that we did it, which I believe is the best way to do it, it takes a lot of effort to do. One person should not be doing that. You need to train people to go out and deliver this so that your organization as a whole is getting the information in a timely manner, and not that one group got it this year and then someone else has to wait 3 years before they get it. If you want to change culture, everyone has to be in those conversations as quickly as possible.
And as John mentioned, participation, we like to have the full courthouse participation. And so that includes the judges participating in training with the staff. And I think, John, your courts are a little different, where you extend it to the bailiff and everyone else in the court. Our courts, the sheriffs are outside of our organization, so they're the ones who provide the safety and security. And so we do extend invitation if they're able to, but they're not always able to participate. But once the court opts in, we make sure that their judges are participating with their staff, and however configuration that is for their docket. So the pros of that is accountability. Everyone's on the same page. They're walking away with the same information. And especially when we're talking about the challenges people are experiencing or some of the strengths, it's good to have everyone in the room to hear how their jobs are impacting other people. I think one thing we didn't mention is we provide what is the definition for customer. And we stress that customer is anyone whose job is impacting you. And so we remind judges that staff are their customers too. And so what they're doing is going to be impacting them. The challenge about that is prioritizing scheduling and also the commitment from the employees and judges, and sometimes, yes. So we have to make sure that we have that discussion and we try to plan out these trainings 4 months ahead of time to really make sure that everyone can be in the room. And then, as I said, semantics is important. In Oregon, we've never had mandatory trainings, but we do have core trainings, which is something that people like, especially when it comes to professional development and knowing that this is a resource for you to be able to provide excellent customer service and to further and do your job better. And so, not having judges in the room is important because sometimes staff are like, I believe my judge needs this training just as much as I do. And so if you are going to try to have this training without judges, be mindful of how staff might be feeling of why aren't judges also getting this training. So we do have a quote from our state court administrator, Nancy Cozine, and I don't know if I really want to read it as much as she felt that the training was, very important and significant and the valuable program, and that's how it became a core training, and to be able to get the buy-in of our presiding judges and trial court administrators to say that they would sign up for this training and provide it to their staff and their judges.
All right. So we want to take some time. I need 2 minutes before we conclude, but I want to take some time to answer any questions that you have, or Valerie and I to answer any questions that you have, and we posted a few questions that you may have in the process. Any questions? Yes, please.
Oh, we have a microphone.
Please wait for the microphone, because we have people who are joining us virtually for this.
I heard you say that you like your judges to participate with the staff, which I can see the benefits to that. Do you find that people are less likely to open up or be honest and authentic in the training when they have the judges in the room, and how are you addressing that?
So what I would say for me, going into the Massachusetts court system with the task of changing the culture, we need to create environments where everyone can be in the room and everyone also have a voice. And to exclude anybody in that process would undermine what it is that we were trying to do. I would say absolutely people will feel hesitant to be authentic and engaged in the process with their direct supervisor in the room or with a judge in the room, whatever it may be. But I do think it's important, if you're going to change the way that you do things for the better, that you can't be exclusive in that process. One of the strongest feedback that we've gotten around this training is that everyone is in the room and we're getting to hear everybody's perspective. And we actually, in some cases, get to hear from a judge where we see them a little bit differently than that distant albatross that we would normally think of, because we don't get to interact with them in any context other than being on the bench. We also get to learn about each other's departments through the process of the training when we're going through strengths, challenges, and solutions. Any other questions? So if you're interested in doing this, please talk to Valerie or I afterwards. Before we conclude, if you're able to, I'd like everyone to please stand up on your feet. And we're going to go through a final exercise. Make sure you have your belts or you pull your pants up. So I am going to say a word. I'm going to spell the word. We're going to say that word together. I'm going to ask you a question at the end of that. I want you to respond appropriately. The word is top. T-O-P, top. 10 times together. Top, 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 top. What do you do with a green light?
Stop.
Idiot, sit back down. You don't stop at a green light. In 10 seconds, I just conditioned you to say that you would stop at a green light. And if I can condition you in 10 seconds, what does your 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years doing the same thing over and over do to condition you to respond without actually understanding if you're responding appropriately? Slow down. Take time to hear what people have to say. Just because everybody that walked up to you, the last 99 people, asked you the same thing, and it sounds like the 100th person asking you the same thing, let them ask the question. Don't assume that you understand what it is that they're there for. They want to be validated just like all of us want to be validated. And it's important that we do that. The number one thing that you can do to support someone is to listen to them actively, authentically. It's the number one thing that you can do to validate somebody. When someone's coming to our courts in very stressful situations, they want validation. They want to be heard. You may not be able to solve their problem the way that they want it solved, but listening to them is going to make that experience go a long way. I want to thank you for the time and attention you had to this presentation, and I hope that I and or Valerie will be able to assist you in the future in bringing something like this to your courts. Valerie?
Just thank you again, and yeah, we're a resource, and we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much.